Sam, nice to meet you.
Well, do an intro here. It's the first time we've had a lot of people face to face.
Who are these people?
Yeah. It's 4 o'clock on my phone, so I think we can just get started here. So we'll do some welcome and introductions to start at the CEC meeting on August 2nd, 2021. We'll do some introductions first. Maybe Brad to start off. We'll go around the room.
Sure. Brad Lenz, City Planner and Staff Facility Commission.
I'm John Kroll, Chairman and Resident of Wausau.
Alzowski, Committee Member.
Ashley Lang, Committee Member, Resident of Wausau.
I'm Mary Clues. I guess I'm still the Vice Chair, and lowly member of the.
Tom Killian, older person, District 3, and member of the committee.
Same muscle assistant planner.
We have some members in the back.
Brian Kowalski, City Pages. Dustin Craig, I'm a Public Works Superintendent.
Great. All right, guys, thank you. The first minutes on the agenda for today is we have to approve the minutes on May 26th, which is our last meeting. If anybody got a chance to read them, we can take a motion to approve.
First, I would say I was not marked absent, so I can't say what happened during the meeting, but I can tell you I wasn't there. You may want to just correct that add me as an absent member.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead, Tom.
I did have some, just a few changes on the minutes due to some poorly timed Windows updates that won't stop on my computer. I cannot get to them right now, but could we possibly hold this over until the next meeting? There were just a couple, particularly in regard to, I think, a statement about Colby and 3M with regulators, but I don't have it in front of me. So.
Okay. So we will forward this to the next meeting, so we'll have to approve 2 meeting minutes at the next meeting. So that is okay. It's not official yet. So moving on to the next section, we are going to move around a few line items here because of Tom's time. He is in a time crunch today. So we'll talk about the 1300 Cleveland Avenue. So discussion of possible recommendations for 1300 Cleveland Avenue. This has been an ongoing discussion with us. So anytime, please.
Sure.
Take it away.
Well, yes, we've had some, I think, good discussion on this, and there have been some references I think we looked at that Brad had sent to the committee, and one of them at least was a pretty up-to-date policy white paper on environmental justice and land usage and zoning, and so that seems to be in terms of municipal policies related to environmental justice, one of the better kind of white papers out there. And I think we had talked about at the last meeting, we had discussed this about perhaps putting together some ideas, but still really giving a lot of weight to what the people, their input in the past and potential input in the future. And I think that's important and a key part of environmental justice, the meaningful involvement, although I think we have gotten a lot of indication to date from those links that Brad had sent the committee. So it's my understanding that this committee has not written a recommendation letter like this in the past, but that we are the liaison, we are the advisory committee on environmental matters according to municipal code. So I was wondering if we could make some brief recommendations today to possibly have Mr. Lenz put together just a draft for a review at a future meeting. And that was my thought, depending on what other committee members think.
I think just getting a list together would be beneficial, not just because we have something to go off of it. There's also been a lot of discussion and input from the public on what options could be, so maybe just putting those on the table would make it official as well. Did you have any ideas, or do you want the committee to start possible solutions?
Well, I'm open to whatever order you would like.
Yeah, so maybe we'll start with the committee members. The biggest one I've heard of is going to be a solar farm or solar garden. That seems to be a really common point of concern is that we don't, there's a lot of residents that don't want to actually build on there, so just putting a fence around it, making it fairly inaccessible, but still putting it to use would be a good idea, but it is zoned residential now, was that correct?
Zoned for multi-family residential, so solar array is actually an industrial use, so the zoning would have to change to industrial to allow that particular use. I guess just a question, I mean, are we putting, you said put together something, but what are we putting together exactly? Just a list, or are we putting together a recommendation, a resolution?
I think
the
we-
land use, a list of zoning, just ideas, I mean, what are we?
I think initially the intent had been to put together a letter from the committee based on recommendations vis-a-vis environmental justice about future land use.
Have we had access to what the public has been trying to get across? I'm sorry that it was.
Yeah, the town forwarded to me, and I moved forward to the committee, past discussions at different committees, and it's been discussed. Oh, I haven't even remember the committees at the city that's been discussed at, but I think during the plan commission and economic development committees, both discussions on what people wanted for that particular property, so there is some written correspondence that people submitted, there's meeting minutes, testimony at the meetings. So that is out there, again, I have to go back and review it, I think it was in response to a particular development, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe not, maybe it's.
There were some that kind of spoke in quite a general regard in terms of what people did not want to see, and I think what they wanted to see in relation to remediation.
Yeah, there was some public input in the form of people actually voicing their concerns as well when we had a meeting. But yeah, I think it's in one of the packets that we've received in the past, there's some public input on those. Anybody else have any suggestions, ideas?
That was a big one, the solar farm
Yeah.
one, yeah. It seemed like at the last meeting, that was kind of one of the general consensus ideas among people. Can we recommend things we don't wanna see also? Or is it just like, hey, this is what we want, but this is also what we don't want kind of thing? Cause I think,
So,
you know, putting, residential area on that piece of property is something we would recommend we don't wanna see also, so I don't know if we can include that.
Yeah, may I address that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Okay,
go ahead,
thank you.
Frank.
Yeah, I think absolutely, what we may feel is not appropriate there would probably be equally important.
Right.
I think, specifically, if you look at that white paper and so forth, the citing of different types of things, I think where they're located and not located is probably a very important aspect.
I have a question, so if there was an option for it to be a solar field on that site, it would have to be rezoned back to industrial. So would that encourage other businesses to have an industrial plan in place if it is rezoned? And then can we decide on that?
Yeah, I mean, generally the zoning is set, not specific to a particular business, but because it makes sense from a land use perspective. So, yeah, once it's zoned industrial, theoretically, something else could go in there. That's permitted by right, but as has been the case all along, the city owns the property, so the zoning is somewhat, secondary, I would say. People might disagree, but we have more control because we own the property. We can choose to, dispose of it to someone and say, we can be much more specific through the disposition than we can through just the zoning district, which is very general. It covers a lot of things, some things we might want, like a solar array, some things we might not want. But again, it's all, zoning is very general, so it could allow different things. But yeah, I guess, again, through the city's process with, disposition and economic development, we can enter into specific agreements that say, you can only do this, or you shall do this on top of this. Those are more controlling than just a general zoning district. That answers the question.
So because it's owned by the city, on the bid is a lot more control on what goes on there. Which is great to hear.
Does it happen to be, I don't have the zoning code memorized, like anything like a category that's sensitive or I don't know what you call it, but like, we have to be careful to not disturb this land though.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just speaking of industrial, there's 3 different categories. There's light, medium, and heavy. And actually 2 of those in the zoning code says they're actually compatible with residential uses. It's just the heavy one you should probably put that next to industrial, next to residential. So there's kind of a gradient of heavy to light, and there's the lighter uses actually don't give off a lot of emissions. Everything's contained indoors. It's more business, kind of commercial on most uses. And then you kind of step up from there from medium to heavy, which gives off, it's more obnoxious to neighboring properties and whatnot. So yeah, there's different, zoning districts. We've talked kind of about buffer zoning. You have a heavy and you have a residential. Maybe there's something in between that's, provides that buffer between the heavy industrial and residential. So yeah, there are different zoning districts, and we can get into some of that if you want.
You mentioned that tends to be a kind of best practices now, right? A buffer type zone.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it's different when you're dealing with sort of legacy industrial that's, you look at a zoning map that we have now, it's checkerboard because the things that are there, a lot of it was around before the zoning code was established. You had industrial next to the residential historically because that's how it was developed. Now it's actually thought of as a decent way to develop because you have jobs next to the factory and people, and that's in some ways it's coming back into vogue with walkability and mixed use and vibrant communities and you don't have a spatial mismatch that you have when you have jobs on the edge of town and people that live in the inner city that can't get to there. There's no mass transit there, so yeah, I mean,
inject something there. And I very much admire your planning expertise. What we can see in Wausau is that they're moving industrial away from planned wealthier areas like the East River front. So there it's not in vogue or desired because they tend to have upscale housing. So they moved Wausau Chemical into the industrial park. They're moving Great Lakes Cheese. Essentially, we know that we're not going to allow 3M to expand on East Hill or something. That is not in vogue. So if you're wealthy and tend to live in a predominantly white area in Wausau, moving forward, it looks like you're generally going to be safe of a disproportionate burden because they're moving them out of the East Riverfront where they're putting high-end development.
that wasn't the reason that they were moved, Tom.
But it's happening, nevertheless, yeah.
That's not the reason why.
I don't state that, but it's tantamount to it, so I just like to make sure that it is consistent throughout the city, and it's not Kantian ethics, so motivation isn't necessarily the determining factor. Outcome is a very important factor. So with these legacy operations, I have, after Mr. Lenz has done some thoughts on that.
What were you talking about?
All right. Any other ideas?
I have a question,
Sure.
just like a background. I'm assuming that area was not always zoned residential. Was it recently rezoned to residential, or has it been for a while and just been in?
The 1300?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good.
It was rezoned, well, had 4 different zonings in basically 4 years.
Okay,
So historically it was industrial.
okay.
This goes back probably 3-4 years. It was rezoned to residential because there, was some thought at the time that there was a developer that was looking at doing some residential on the site. So the city back then, I don't remember the exact dates, I think it was 2018, 2017, rezoned it to residential. Had been then, we redid the zoning code and the zoning maps, we rezoned the whole city. And during that, it was actually rezoned back to its historic district versus what it had been rezoned to. So it got assigned an industrial zoning class when the citywide zoning map was adopted. It was brought to light that, it was actually rezoned to residential before, the zoning code took effect, so then it was rezoned back to residential to reflect that previous zoning map amendment that went from industrial to residential. So that's where it sits today, as a multi-family residential district, but there isn't a specific project that's on the horizon. Generally, the zoning, when the city owns the property, generally the zoning works hand in hand with the redevelopment because there's multiple options for zoning. It could be 3 or 4 different zoning districts. We use this planned unit development district a lot, so sometimes that's kind of a part of the redevelopment planning, but in this case it was just rezoned again to reflect the past zoning change that happened. So that's kind of where it's at now. And the land use during that time hasn't changed at all. It's just the zoning district kind of has been adjusted.
A little bit,
Yeah,
okay.
and it basically, the city zoning decisions are, well, is this appropriate or not? Yes or no? And, it's possible that multiple things could be appropriate. Like we're debating now, we may want to go back to industrial to allow a specific use, which is the solar. So if that goes away, then something else might come forward, and may
It's flexible.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And then Mr. Lenz had brought up, I wouldn't have been aware of the zoning kind of issue that had occurred had Mr. Lenz not brought that up, so very appreciative that he had done that at that time. And when we talk about things like what may happen, could this be Pandora's box with some sort of iteration of industrial zoning, if it's for like a solar type siting or something? I think there are ways we could probably deal with that in our recommendation to make sure that there are some protections in place. And I think one recommendation, given the location of the site, it's surrounded by largely residential area, would be to recommend that no matter what happens with the land usage, that it is remediated up to non-industrial standards. So, and I don't think it would ever happen with the city in the background, but one thing that'll do is make sure that industrial doesn't look more appealing for any type of cost-saving tactic. So if that's done on the front end, I think we can probably put a safeguard in place there. And I think Alder Neal had kind of mentioned something similar, if I'm not mistaken, at the committee of the whole, that, the land should kind of be dealt with before anything's done with it. And then I think looking at what was in the volume of public input, and we can perhaps go back and look at it again before any type of final recommendation so that the members all have seen it. But it was pretty heavy on a desire to not have further industrial expansion on that property. And I think when industrial was mentioned in that regard, it was in relation to the 2 proposals that had come in from the RFP, which was 3M Company and Colby, both with serious environmental histories over the years. And so I think recommending in the vein of people that have already put in public input, and I've heard quite a bit outside of those emails recommending against industrial expansion there. And that's another thing I saw in the white paper and really any other environmental justice documentation with citing that, and Mr. Lenz is right, that, 1929 is when 3M had been established there. And so it is, you've got some legacy dynamics around there. Nevertheless, it's 2021, and I think, well, we don't have a time machine to go back and fix problems that may have occurred. We can exercise reason now to make sure they don't get worse. So I think my suggestion would be we put a recommendation in against those industrial proposals, and then any industrial use of the land that does not stem directly from the public participation process. So I think if the recommendation is made that way, some of these areas in town, it hasn't just been the southwest side, the area around Wausau Chemical historically is another good example that I think could have used some protections. It's been, I think there's been a feeling in these neighborhoods that it's been kind of a colony or monopoly board where third parties have come in, even though it's been a neighborhood, and kind of imposed their will without even asking people how they felt. And I think meaningful involvement is key, so that if there is, like for the solar idea that was brought up by really multiple residents at this point, I think if there was to be any quote-unquote industrial usage, it would stem from the public participation process, but outside of that, it would really, I think, not be a pragmatic or just location for more industrial.
Yeah, I think that all sounds good. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions? Not, I would like to have a brain dump. I don't have a lot of experience with like chemical remediation sites, but I've seen a lot of sites upgraded to a surface level where it is usable. So I remember Wisconsin Rapids, they upgraded a yard waste site and made it into a BMX racing course. So something along all that, again, it's just on the surface. There's nobody living there, but things that can just be done on top. So recreation, I don't know. If it's going to stay residential, I suggest I'm doing everything above ground, I guess. So everything slab on grade, nothing in ground. Extra measures should be taken if it's going to be like for water, sewer, and stuff like that. So that anything that has to be in the ground has to be held to a higher standard. And then the other thing was going to be, I've also seen sites used for biomass instead of solar, depending on the area. So I've seen, what do they use? Wood chips for like lumber mills and whatnot, and that can be used for energy instead of using solar. It's a little more easier, I'm not gonna say easier to use. It's more on demand of what you needed. So if you need it at night and day, you can use in the night or day. So it's a little more steady line of power instead of being with the sun and with the night. So those are the things I just wanted to put down. The other thing I wanted to say was research. You can be used as a research. If it is remediated, if it's not remediated, it's going to be used as a long-term research site as well. So those are just thoughts.
I like that research site idea. I mean, if you're gonna do something wrong a long time ago, and you can learn from it somehow,
So,
like.
Yeah, there's a lot of testing going on, but what are those testings going to do in the next 30, 40, 50 years? So it's something that can be monitored if there's testing equipment installed or whatnot. So, all right.
Could we motion to have Mr. Lenz put together kind of a draft of these things so that we might be able to review it next time? May I make that motion?
Yeah, that's fine. So, okay. Motion on the floor by Tom to.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Who said that?
Alright, motion passes. Alright. Tom, you have another prior appointments, so we will let you go.
Thank you for rearranging things, I appreciate it.
Alright, so moving on, we'll have a discussion on green tier scorecard. So just as a follow, or as a refresher, in middle, I think, the end of March, Brad had to complete the first round of the DNR green tier scorecard. Now that he has it's all full slated, everything is ready to go, we can now use it as a guide for recommendations or anything like that, as ways we want to improve. So maybe Brad can start off there.
So I think some direction from previous meetings is that you wanted us to take a look at it and give a little bit of a report on, what do we have here, what can we do in the short term, what's kind of the low-hanging fruit, or what aligns with some of the things that we have been talking about at the committee level, and just to sort of take a closer look at it. The committee kind of gave us that direction to do that. I know Sam had taken a look at it himself. I don't know, I picked, not to steal his thunder, but I did pick out a couple things maybe that we can look at. I have it up, I don't have it up there. What happened to it? I'm not sharing my screen. Let me try that again. So this is what it looks like. I don't know how much bigger I can get it, but so yeah, I mean, just kind of going from top to bottom. Line 11 is Safe Routes to School program. We did get funded with a DOT grant to do that for the rest of the schools in the Wausau School District. It's the team we have done separately, but we will be doing a more robust, I guess, Safe Routes to School plan. So that will be happening, I guess, kind of outside of this, but at least be able to get some points in this scorecard and work towards that. Biking and walking, this one should be a relatively easy one too. We just have to put the time in to do some measuring of some different walkability areas of the city, and there may actually be some auto-generated data that we have that we can just put some time in to generate some numbers for the scorecard.
So is that measured on like proximity to things like that, or just like pathing,
I don't know. It's been a while since I looked at it. Do you remember what goes into that? Is it?
I don't know what all goes into it. I think part of it is proximity to like how many things you might do on a daily basis.
Okay.
Like
grocery store or something?
But there is a cool heat, not every community has it, so Wausau has a heat map for Wausau, so you can get kind of just a flyover without having to type an address over address, but sure, it's still do that anyway if you want the exact location and stuff.
All right, another one, mixed use language from Smart Code, part of our zoning district. We didn't give ourselves any points last time, but now that we looked at it, our zoning code was redone a couple of years ago, and Smart Code is a specific kind of model ordinance, I guess. And we actually used some very similar things to that. Actually, we used the same graphics, open source graphic, we just pulled right from there. So there is a lot of similarities there that we can give ourselves points. I guess we'll have to look at closer to see how many points we can give ourselves, but that's, again, sort of another one that we've already done or can do really, really quickly. So there's one in here about chemical usage, and with our NOMO ordinance, I think we kind of touched on that a little bit. create community policy and best management practice guidelines on minimizing chemical use during vegetation management of public and private properties. So I think part of that normal May was educating people about pesticides and chemicals. And that was only a temporary thing, but I think we should be able to get some partial points for that we didn't have last year.
That gives me an idea. And maybe this actually can go back to our list of possible land uses. Cause I'm like hardcore about the no money thing now, like all about it. So I was talking to Dr. Del Toro this weekend, and he was talking about how they're just putting in like an educational garden on campus, and so they've got different so they're planting like an educational pollinator garden, which I think is a cool idea because the public can come in and they can learn about all the different like flowers and plants that they can plant in their own yards. But then they also have examples of like there's a grass species apparently that doesn't grow more than like 2 inches, so you never have to mow it. And they have different examples of like ground cover and things like that you can do besides like a traditional lawn. So I mean that's another idea that we could do something with that piece of land, like an educational garden or something like that. That would also then tie in with the normal May and just an idea.
Yeah, that reminds me. I mean, we talked a little bit about should we bring in like the Parks Department, DPW, and maybe do a section of a park or something, and maybe that could tie in like as a demonstration area. Because we kind of focused on just the citizens. We didn't even bring up the topic.
Get into
parks.
other things, yeah. Because I mean that is a big chunk of land.
Yeah,
Like a
absolutely.
smaller, it doesn't have to be just one thing. It doesn't have to be just a solar garden. It could be a solar garden and a pollinator. And it could kind of be this whole, educational. I mean, you can teach people about solar energy as well, but it's kind of a thought. I've been really fixated on the normal May thing since it happened, so.
You can add it to your list, Brad.
I like it. I don't know.
See how I voted for making you make the list, but I'll help you put things on it.
Alright. I think I had one more on here about complete streets. It's something we've talked about, we've been talking about for a few years now, just haven't pulled the trigger on it. We have to work with our engineering department, Public Works, very closely on that. I think there's some draft form that we have. So a complete streets policy is just how we build new streets with biocompatible foundations and sustainability factors, considering all users of the street, not just the cars that drive past. So it could be something we work on. I guess just as a kind of blanket statement, there are a handful of these smaller ones that we can, Sam and I can do as staff without too much help from the outside. But then there's also these bigger issues that, it's just one line on the chart, but it's a big project that, other communities we looked at, Eau Claire and I think Menominee is the example. They got grant funding for it. They had a task force with not just city folks, but private sector and state agencies, and it's a big involvement to do. So those are longer term things that we can do. It's just we may not just be able to check it off the list as quickly as we do. I don't know, Sam, was there any ones that you wanted to point out in particular? I know I probably took the easy ones from.
I have a few, just like little things here and there. I don't think we got any points for a shoreline buffer because we don't have a 75-foot one, but we have a 51, which is better than nothing. So I don't know if we can get commercial credit. Yeah, a lot of stuff. It's where I'm coming from. We had a municipal utility, so here it's private with like WPS and stuff. But they do have a program where you can purchase green energy somehow. But that's also, can we take credit for that? Probably not, because it's not our initiative.
If there's a solar panel on the public site, could that be included in?
Yeah.
Just-
It's our solar. So maybe.
That's a good question, I don't know how that would work. I know there's like rules and rules when you're getting into that stuff, but
Yeah.
it's something worth researching. Tracking vehicle miles traveled or traffic counts. DOT makes those available, and lane miles per capita, stuff like that. I'm kind of waiting on census data to come out because hypothetically we've only added a few miles of road, but we've added this many people to our city or county or whatever. Do enough of a quick calculation to justify okay, we kind of densified compared to the past. Maybe get some credit for that.
Is there a pandemic factor in there?
Yeah.
What, can we take credit for people working at home now?
Yeah.
Good question, yeah. Yeah, how much traffic reduction do you have for only 2 months straight? Another one I thought of, inventory of known contaminated properties for reuse planning, possible GIS. So, I mean, DNR has that already. I don't know if we find out there's stuff in addition to what's on DNR, I don't know what that would look like, but we could compile something easily. I have access to our online and I've done stuff like that before. Mine was more just a vacant mobile size map, but I can take the same concept and maybe properly stuff.
I bet Tom would help you with that.
For review, Brad, is there a certain percentage every year that has to be increased, or what are the guidelines for that?
It's kind of an honor system
Okay.
thing. They ask you for a target for next year.
Okay.
And at the time I put in, we scored 280 the first time, I put in
Yeah.
300, which is probably too high. I didn't go
Really?
into all the details because, like I said, some of them we can get more points for, some of them are going to take a lot of time. But yeah, we're not going to be kicked out if we don't do something. But I think it does help to keep moving forward and increase our points, even if it's just a little bit year.
So my thought is maybe we can set up a goal for a certain percentage of our current score every year. That could be, just a very generic way to monitor how we're improving. So 20 points of 280, is that almost 5%?
280 to 300.
Yeah, or like 20 points of 280, I don't know. Anyways, that could be like a very general guideline of how to approach every year. And especially for the first year, you can really pick those low hanging fruits so you can get a feel of how it works. Can be improved the easiest, and then 2 years you can start tackling the harder ones. It's not good. Any thoughts? So I think the idea is that we're going to use this as a guideline for making recommendations for what we want to do for a strategic plan for the mayor's ideas, but we can go bigger than that. But then again, this is more just a guideline. That's how I see it. If we want to tackle specific things on what we can bring them up during meetings.
I have a question about how it ties, I don't know where the general strategic planning process is, because I'm just going from the notes and it said that, there'll be a consultant and this summer or fall really get more started on that. So I'm just interested in how we can tie this to some things that could help in the strategic plan generally for the city so that it's more widely known, like what these goals could be.
Is that a good segue maybe to the next one?
I don't even know if that's on.
Yeah, I think we have the strategic plan on this one. We have greenhouse gas.
Well, yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to bring up, but.
Because I'd like to see the strategic plan on every agenda, really, especially if things are very.
Yeah, we can put that on next time. I know we've talked about it before, and we're a little, I guess, behind schedule on that. But I think the consultant is now hired. We haven't really started too much stuff yet, strategic plans. That's certainly open for us to offer our input and ideas in it. Yeah, again, we've had this discussion about what exactly do we give to the mayor or the consultant, or, you know, it seemed like they're doing a lot of outreach for the plan. It's, you know, some cities may do a strategic plan just by themselves and, you know, crunch some numbers and analytics and whatever, but I mean, this one's going to be very open and transparent, that we want people to participate. You know, the mayor's going to be seeking a lot of feedback from a lot of different people, so I think there's definitely plenty of time for us to get in front of the consultant and offer our feedback. You know, how specific and concise we want to be as it relates to this, you know, I'm not sure. Are we going to, you know, pick some of the elements or go bigger? Because the way this thing's set up, I think there's like 12 categories, and then there's 100 some, I think, individual elements. Mm-hmm. There's kind of subcategories under that. You know, transportation, there's several that pertain to that. You know, water resources, there's different ones under there. So, yeah, I don't have a specific answer on that yet, but it's definitely worth talking about some more on this. So.
Maybe we can put that back on for the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like that.
Cause I don't, you know, we did kind of touch on that in our discussion at the last meeting, and I think to your point, you know, talking about using this as a guideline, as we sort of talked about, once we identify some of the areas that we're kind of lacking in, is then using that to develop goals within the strategic plan. So I like the idea of kind of keeping it on the agenda each time, so we can kind of just work on pieces of it as it comes up.
Okay. So moving forward on the scorecard, my thought is maybe we can just let Brad, Sam, maybe for the foreseeable future, maybe just start working on those like low-hanging fruits. I mean, like those are things you guys don't need a lot of access or help on, I would think. But maybe we can start thinking of, if the committee wants to go the way of maybe just setting a percentage of every year with points of, if that's something that we want to track.
Well, I mean, I think some of it too, like setting out their sights on some of the longer term ones. You said, you know, it's Brad, like you said, that it's gonna take their longer term projects, or their, you know, you need a longer time period to even get the wheels turning on some of these things. To start thinking about that, like 2-3 years from now, what could we be turning over by then?
So with the 300 that you had put down for 2021, that's 7% increase in points. So yeah, maybe shoot for, I'm just throwing out numbers like 5 to 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Sure. Yeah. Take a closer look at the actual numbers of that.
Sure. Okay. All right, any more discussion on green tier? All right. Maybe we'll leave that in the hands of Brad now, then when we need to bring something back up, just let us know, or if anybody has anything in the future, we can bring it up. All right, the next item on our agenda is discussion on greenhouse gas emission reduction resolution. So the idea was that many cities are putting together a resolution that is a target date of what their targets are for greenhouse gas reductions over a certain amount of time. So many of them are using 2050 as a specific date. You know, we can make it as broad or as minute as we want, but the idea is that we have a number on paper to say that the city has to follow these guidelines and make these changes by a certain date.
Just a question, when we say city, are they doing an inventory or an estimate of city functions, or us, our community, our city?
I think it's all the above, and I've even seen it split
Oh, okay.
between a municipality and public, so that's something that we can discuss on how we want to approach that. So, Yeah, if you have anything to add.
Well, yeah, I mean, we started poking around with some of the data that's public from the DNR. And this was one of the links that we shared, and so this is by facility, right? So this is statewide. I noticed the ones in Wausau are basically private companies, private facilities. And the public ones, there didn't appear to be any public ones listed here other than WPS. The power plant is on here. But everything else, the 3M plant is on here as well. But it doesn't appear they track the public facilities, and they may actually be exempt from reporting to the DNR. So I don't know yet how we would track public facilities in terms of emissions. Other cities that think have done it, like mentioning the Claire's and the Mounties. I think they worked with a state agency in getting some of that data, but from the looks of it, from what I can tell, I can't really find anything that's publicly available at this point. So that's going to require a little bit more research on how to get that. Sure. So yeah, I think we talked about, we can set target. Well, we can do a resolution that we want to cut emissions, but if it's going to be more than just something that's aspirational, if we want some targets and some progress, we have to sort of set a baseline and work from there. So I think there's going to be a lot that goes into it with conversing with DNR and the utility or other state agencies that help us compile this data. It doesn't appear it's really available to us.
So are you saying that you think it's a better idea to have some of the baseline before a resolution is passed, or to set some kind of goals in a resolution before we know what the baseline is?
I was thinking we would have some idea of what to put in that resolution, because the target resolutions say that you're going to cut X by certain dates, and it's like, well, we have thrown darts.
That's
I'm not sure what.
Without knowing where we're at right now.
But I mean, other communities have passed just general blanket statements. I mean, even I think some of our earlier attempts from previous commissions, like the eco-municipality thing, I think that was more aspirational. It says, we're going to commit to be greener, we're going to do this and that, but it wasn't like targets necessarily. So, I mean, it could be done. We pass a resolution saying we're going to go down this road, we're going to.
Well, I guess I'm thinking, is there a reason that right now it's really timely? And what came to my mind was, seems to me the Europeans are doing something about tariffs.
Right.
And that sets generally this whole country up to say, what are we doing to cut emissions? And so I just wondered about that, how does it help our whereas situation? Because we have to have a list of whereases. How do you say that?
Careful.
And, so I just wondered if other people had thoughts on it, because I know that whole thing about tariffs from the Europeans has been in the news.
Just to go back on the decision, so I think the question was, do we get a baseline first or do we put the resolution first? So I guess the way I view it is, if there's not a resolution, would the city pursue even getting a baseline?
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it could start with a resolution, like here's our commitment to do X, Y, and Z because of X, Y, and Z. And then, later on, when we know more about what we're actually gonna target, we can always do something again and say, now specifically, we're gonna do, just to kind of kind of get the foot in the door,
Like to resolve to set the baseline and then, like, step one will be to set the
Yep.
baseline.
Yeah.
And then take additional action once we understand better our situation. And those Europeans are sedentaries, you know.
And then it at least sets our commitment and.
Yeah, there's actually, I'll go back to our Bible here.
Yeah, I think there was something on there.
Yeah, I think there was, I think we talked about last
So
time.
there's- There's the element that says, commit to achieving a science-based, community-wide greenhouse gas reduction goal.
There it is. We commit to it, we get some points.
Cross my heart and hope to God.
Mhm.
So that could get us some easy points and set us on our way.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
So yeah, right here. So these are community energy use policies, and yeah, there's the one I just read here. Commit to achieving a science-based community.
Only 1 point.
It's worth three.
Oh, no, it's worth
We gave
three. Okay,
ourselves
sorry.
one that we were listed as energy independent community. But, so we got a couple points there to get there.
So we, I just wanted to bring up the strategic plan again. I know we discussed it in the past, but like the more I think about it, I think, like in my opinion, this is probably one of the better ways to move forward on everything, is just have the greenhouse gas reduction as part of the plan. If that is in the strategic plan, everybody can reference it. And then if they are referencing that, maybe they can reference green tiers as like a tie-in. So, yeah, my thought, I think we discussed this last time, was if we commit to it now, we say we put this in the strategic plan, and then the next few years, starting in 2025, there's a baseline started, and we do 25 and 2050, that's 25 years to get a certain percentage.
Mhm.
2050 is, again, a very common year, it's a very round number, and 25 years is very, that's generation, so.
I'll be dead. Good luck.
I
I'll
was
be
actually
dead.
thinking in my head,
Good luck,
I'm
I'll be
not
dead.
even 25 years.
So,
Just, I'm such a realist lately, it's been a hard year, you know.
It's true.
I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist.
so I remember you had, there was like a chicken or egg conversation about this, and I don't remember what was the
I
other
know,
one.
I was just trying to remember too. I think this was the conversation,
Yeah.
like, do we commit to it first and then
Okay.
have the details come later, or do we
Sure.
start with the details and, I mean,
Well, what are potential paths forward, I guess I'd be wondering, like, usually our stuff goes to some other committee to get to the city council, and I'm assuming the resolution really doesn't do much unless it gets to city council and they take a stand. So how do we strategize to say that it's going to move forward, like, and where would it go from here?
Yeah, is there, like,
Yeah.
what's the next committee goes to, what are the odds of that?
It's kind of general, like, it's not economic development, it's not.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter too much. I mean, they could kick it somewhere else.
Okay.
It
Sure.
belongs there, and it can go to any number of standing committees, I guess. You're right. Yeah, just wondering what specifically to take there. If it's just a resolution, I guess. Commit to achieving science-based. You can probably write a resolution of some kind. Yeah, I guess I was thinking too, if there is a funding source or a program that we could apply to, maybe as part of the resolution, like the city's committing to applying for this grant or applying for this program. And necessarily to kickstart it too with this resolution.
Are there federal initiatives, seems like you mentioned something, John, that there's things about federal initiatives going on right now, or But I think the international scene is not, it pays to mention that.
That's, how do you foreshadow that? I don't know, but, EPA, I don't remember, I guess it's Sam or Brad would have, access to finding that easier, but, EPA definitely, they usually have like grants or whatnot, funding of some sorts. I know there's a lot of like brownfield grants and stuff, but doesn't like directly tie into, like this is just a conversation. I don't know, yeah, I guess I wouldn't know. That's not my head.
But I thought there was something in general that at the federal level, they're encouraging, like, there's certain things that would be more available to the city if we have a resolution, or,
Possibly.
oh, we don't know it.
I don't know.
So that all needs research.
So, did you have something to say, Brad?
Well, no, not really. I mean, that could be part of our homework too. I mean, rather than rushing through a half-baked resolution, maybe need to.
Well, and it might depend on the infrastructure bill that apparently is, something's happening, I don't know, it
Maybe
changes
it's-
every day, but,
Maybe it's more appealing than if it's, if we can use, like funding, from the government to maybe pass it through faster or wait for each opera plan or whatnot.
or if they're disadvantages, like not even funding to do something, but like those communities that do it, I don't know if they'll have any, those communities that do something will have some advantage over those who haven't. I don't know what they're planning to do with that stuff, but I heard the climate's in there. I don't know how it comes out and I don't know.
So, I think the discussion, should move forward as to how do we want to implement this? Is it a standalone resolution? Is it something we want to put in as a recommendation for this strategic plan? Those are discussions that maybe think we can maybe have in the future.
My thought is, I'm up for putting out a resolution to say that we're doing some things before even they set a bench line, because I'm also thinking, you could be doing all the work and then the city council says, we're not interested at all.
Fair.
So, then the other part might be, well, actually, we have these opportunities because of what the research you've done, so it's kind of again, we're chicken and egg,
Right.
but I'm all for that, because I also think then, once that's set, then it puts us in a better position to say, and we should influence the strategic plan, because we've already passed this resolution, we said we're gonna do it. I mean, I think it pays for us to watch for our environment.
All right, and I think that kind of the way we're going with this thought, to just have a resolution to, say we're gonna do something, even get the ball rolling, is pretty acceptable to most people. That's not a highly objectionable thing, as much as like, if you have goals in there already,
Right.
because then people are like, well, how are we gonna meet those goals? We don't know what they are, that's much more disputable.
It's easier to.
Where, if we just start putting out something that's more like, where you want to start taking steps to be able to do this,
And our commitment is that time,
Right.
as opposed to, turning everything upside down.
Yeah, so like the resolution is like the initial push of the snowball, you're saying? Just
Right.
follow up with that.
Let me see.
So, okay. I think what we should do is maybe for the next meeting, we can vote, maybe have a discussion and action on how we want to, I guess, move that forward.
Yeah, we can just talk to you in the meantime too.
Sure.
Just because
Go ahead,
it's
Zach.
part of our review.
Can I request that committee members think of why we're doing this? Basically
Yeah.
building our whereas list.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if we each just did a little paying attention to the media and everything and think about why would we ask the city to do this?
Right.
And then we can build that whereas list from there.
Mary's giving up homework.
Can you tell
And
us?
it's not to Brad.
Or
It's to
educator.
everyone
No,
else.
it's not Brad. It's
Need a
a
second, a motion.
Yeah.
You can't ever take the teacher out of a teacher.
That's good, Ruby. That
So
all gives
I
some
agree.
motivation.
Mhm.
Alright. Any more discussion on that? So I think we have some ideas for that. Alright,
Just maybe a procedural question, so when we're talking about, okay, do we want this to be a resolution or a suggestion for the strategic plan? Do suggestions for the strategic plan need to come from us in like a formal, like, do you know how is that gonna work? Do we have to have a resolution that says we recommend putting this in the strategic plan, or is it gonna be a little more casual than that?
I think you could do both or
Either
either, I think the resolution would probably carry some weight at higher levels. But like I said, I think, we will be taking input from everywhere, multiple different, groups and individuals, so I think, I'd encourage the consultant to maybe come to this commission at some point.
Right. Okay.
If anyone is opposed to that.
alright. Moving on to our next topic, discussion of incorporating sustainability into new development projects. So this was first discussed when the mall project was first getting headway. And the idea was that between a public and private partnership of some sorts, what would be the best way to incorporate these energy efficient measures in future buildings onto that site? So now that the mall is coming down, they're brought up again, so but this isn't very specific to a mall. Mainly, how can we encourage more sustainable practices and energy efficiency into buildings that are being built on lands that have some public way to it? So, go ahead, Brad.
Oh, yeah, I just suggested maybe broadening the topic, not focusing
Yeah.
specifically on the mall, but we have other development projects that happen throughout the city regularly. Some are city-owned land now, some of them are privately owned, and sometimes, projects get done in different ways. I mean, sometimes the city does incentivize them, and that gives us a certain leverage over the projects, and other times they don't ask the city for anything at all, they just need to follow our zoning ordinances. Sometimes they need some zoning changes or something there, so that's kind of in between asking nothing and asking for money, essentially. So there's different ways that, projects happen, and I guess there's different ways that we can encourage sustainability. Again, the most direct way is if we're incentivizing a project, or if we own the land, which I guess kind of similar to incentivizing it, but we have a lot of control in that case. We can specify things that they should do or should not do. And I went to our applications, our TIF applications. So city incentives are generally tax income and financing. And, in the actual application, it does ask some questions that are related to sustainability. One is number 4, are they going to focus on energy for energy efficiency? Yes or no? Are you going to use PACE funding for alternative energy? So some of that we are already asking developers, and that factors into whether they should give incentives or how much incentives should you give them. So that is part of the process already, although it could be potentially stronger. Our zoning, getting back to the zoning code, there's some things that we allow now that are a little more clear in terms of sustainability, like smaller solar arrays, not the big ones where you're selling energy but you're just using internally for your project. Those are permitted when energy is permitted. We do regulate a little bit more in terms of sustainability features like cutoff light fixtures. We have parking maximums now to where we didn't before, so we're trying to reduce asphalt parking lot, heat island, runoff, all the things that go with large parking areas. We require bicycle parking, encouraging alternative forms of transportation. There's landscaping standards that are higher than for parking areas for stormwater runoff and heat island type stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of different things that we are doing, that we have sort of stepped up a little bit in the last couple of years, specifically for zoning code, but, I guess there's always, room to do more potentially. And some of it, frankly, there's private developers and, one of the riverfront developers, does a lot of sustainable features, just as part of the business model, because they have to sell their units, they want to attract, certain people that appreciate those features, so they do it automatically, as an investment to their projects, so. Somewhat, it doesn't necessarily have to be regulated by the city for it to happen, but I guess that is a way of making sure that it does happen.
Oh,
So-
so my question was, is there a way to encourage their creativity and maybe not even encourage it, but recognize their creativity and be that, not having, I mean, because obviously it's nice to know exactly, these are specs that you need to do, but I hate to just box people in like, and that's all you have to do,
Yeah.
when they might wanna do more and they could be reworded, I don't know the right word for it, but recognize at least that they're doing above and beyond.
Well, we have the word for that now.
I know, we gotta get the word out more.
Like a sustainability showcase or something, like these are all the ideas that people are thinking outside the box and doing.
Yeah, no, I did think of that too. When we were talking about the awards, and we did give out one last year, and maybe it's something
I
to
think
celebrate a little more, or.
yeah, and it needs to tell people more often, like, because I'd like to see one given in every category every year.
Yeah, I think we need to maybe look closer and harder at businesses that are using these techniques, but we can talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
But, so, my thoughts on this is that the city has some guidelines and whatnot for, what can a developer do and whatnot. My ideas are that while the city has some guidelines, there are some national guidelines and standards that could be met, and that have more stringent and more just a higher echelon guidelines. So the first one that comes to mind would be LEED. There's different levels of LEED. So if there's going to be, especially, the reason why I brought this up is because the mall could be a flagship. This is going to be like a major feature of a redevelopment. If LEED is incorporated as an option, maybe the city could say we can do this up for like a tax incentive if you reach LEED this or LEED that. The higher you go, maybe like a tax bracket or something like that. So it's not something that they have to participate in, but the incentive is there. But yeah, and the reason why the LEED works so well is because it's a check-based approach. So if they reach, it's very similar to like a green tier scorecard. If they reach all this, you count the points and whatnot, and then if you have so many points, you get bronze, gold, silver, platinum, and whatnot. So the higher they go, like the more tax incentive maybe you can possibly get. Go ahead.
No, yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, tying it specifically to taxes might be a little dicey.
Yeah,
But I
I
mean,
don't know other ways. Yeah.
right, I mean, there's different incentives that we can offer, and yeah, it may not be based on their actual tax rate.
Sure.
A different incentive, but a lot of bigger projects do seek some city assistance, so.
Sure.
That can be built into it. Yeah, we generally, tax issues are a little sticky, but, we do offer reverse tips to developer payments and things like that, which don't get us in trouble with,
Yeah.
with how we tax properties. So, yeah, the point is the same. I mean, there can be incentives tied to different levels of greenness, I guess. You know, I know a lot of companies have, or the developers, you know, the leads to actually be certified is process and costs a fair amount of money. So I mean, they can do the same amount of work, just maybe not get the plaque on their building. Some do it for the recognition, but others, yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So I don't know.
Pay for that, I don't know. For the
Yeah.
certification.
Reimburse for the certification.
Yeah. Just thoughts. Yeah. But the same can be said for residential as well, you know, it doesn't have to be just relegated to industrial or commercial, even though those are the most common. The other thing I wanted to mention was that while there are checklists for example, LEED, there are also other standards that is performance-based. So if a building tests, you know, to like a higher standard, so it would have to be tested regarding like light counting, bulbs and whatnot, air tightness, you know, how is electrical run, stuff like that. So again, there's a checklist-based and a performance-based. So if they meet a few hierarchies of each of those, they can hit those.
I wish houses had,
Sorry, what's
I
that?
wish houses had ratings like, you know, like the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Right.
So, which houses have ratings?
Yeah, you know, like your refrigerator rates a
Yeah.
98 or
Yeah.
whatever, why your house weighs.
So,
My house is like a negative.
yeah.
Your house rates a.
So old, bad.
In the United States, there's typically 4 ratings that are pursued. The easiest one is the HERS rating. It's a home energy rating score. That's the most common. There's really no like threshold you have to reach, but it's just a score on what you get. The next is going to be Energy Star. It's a step above. Again, so there's testing involved. How tight is the house? What kind of furnace? All those. How much insulation? The next is DOE. So the Department of Energy, Zero Energy Ready Home has to meet the threshold of if you put like solar on it, I'm going to do net zero. So that's number 3, and then there's a national, or not a national, it's a worldwide standard of passive house, which is it's basically you have to meet air tightness and energy use. You just have to meet those thresholds. So that's performance based as well.
So how about nobody's using them?
Yeah.
Wisconsin is definitely lagging in this. Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan a little bit further ahead in the Midwest.
So it's a homeowner that has to request to have the inspection come in, or?
It's, so if they're building a new house, it's just part of the process. You just,
Okay.
like you say to your builder, I want this to be passive house, and make it work. Existing houses, it's possible, but that's just homeowner led. Yeah.
Not this market.
Yeah.
So like multi-family homes, kind of the same thing, like if they were building an apartment complex or something.
Yeah, you can do like a rating for those. So if you know anybody wants to do them, I'm gonna have them call me because I'm.
Kind of curious just to see what
Full
mine would
disclosure, I am a rater, but out of state. I don't work in Wisconsin. So.
be. Okay, I was wondering how you knew so much about it off the top of your head.
But yeah, so I guess on this, I think the thought process is that we can have like some form of incentive just to encourage developers. And it doesn't have to be for energy, it can be for anything. So like LEED does have like water in their like perspectives on what you can accomplish. Waste is another thing as well. So those can all be captured. So maybe you can think of some ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going back to this application, and
Sure.
this is for city assistance, so maybe this is where we build something in,
Oh, sure. Okay.
just say it. And I don't know if we assign a specific, dollar amount or percentage necessarily, but it could be a factor in when we weigh the project, and whether we're gonna incentivize it or not. But
So yeah, maybe like an addendum to that could be a way to go to approach that.
I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but I'm going off of what Mary was saying about, recognizing local businesses and industry that are doing really good things for sustainability. And, obviously we have the award, which is awesome, and it gets kind of that exposure, but, what if we even did something like just put together, kind of showcase different businesses and different things that they're doing, and then they get exposure as well, but like then when someone comes and fills out this application, and they get this packet, like that's part of the packet, is like, here's some ideas that you could implement in your own business that, businesses here are already doing, and
Yeah.
kind of pave the way, and, even if they don't use it, they're at least kind of, the people that are doing things right are getting more exposure, and then, it might inspire someone to follow suit also. It's like an educational, like one-page thing or something that they get.
Just, it's a message of this is what we aspire to,
Right.
like, we're not just that,
Exactly,
we wanna,
Maybe tie into greenhouse gas resolution, something like that.
There you go, yeah.
and that's
Or try to-
whereas, yes.
Right. One of the whereases.
I just had a thought so if somebody fills out a TIF and they mark these, so if they're using PACE, if they're using Focus Energy, can we use that information to see or maybe like find people to recognize for the award? Is that like public information?
Oh, yeah, like if they,
yeah, it should be public.
it should, yeah, I would think it would be.
It just might be a way to find like businesses or developers
Right.
instead of having people nominate, but
Yeah, I can't list them off the top of my head, so I have to go back and see what their applications are.
That's a good idea.
okay. Any other discussion on that? Paul, it's kind of going on a little bit, no?
What's that?
Like, just like buildings in general.
Right. No, I don't really have any discussion for it. I can see, I think that Brad's probably on the right track with getting this form being the place for it to go in.
Right, yeah.
So it would at least be a consideration point for them
Mhm.
that way. If you have to write yes or no on something, when you're trying to get money from people,
Right.
you generally try to have a lot of yeses and they're positive.
Yeah, you would
I'll
hope.
be surprised.
Is this a binding document? I know it's an application, but it's not like a
Right.
contract, right? Like if they say, yes, we are going to do all these things, can they still just not do any of them? And like be not held to this, or is it?
Yeah, this specific one is not binding. We enter into an agreement with them after everything's
Went
approved.
through,
It's, it's usually the agreements are, dozens of pages long, and
Right.
there's a lot of stuff in there that you never imagine would be there. That's kind of where the rubber meets the road, and this could potentially work its way into those agreements. I don't know if there's a direct, if we take this and plop it right into the
Put it right
agreement,
in, yeah.
theoretically, we probably should.
Though it's still, there's a bit about accountability, that what are the consequences if your yes becomes a no? That would be the one thing, like, by the way, your award will be lowered or whatever, I don't know how
No, yeah,
that
that's-
has to work.
They're called clawbacks in our developer agreement. It's like, if you don't meet this, we're gonna take some of your money away. We do that on multiple factors, and that could be
Could be
theoretically one of them.
considered, yeah.
Right, they do that with timeframes sometimes, right?
Yeah,
Like
if you
it's
don't-
gotta be completed, your project has to be completed within this much time to qualify.
Pay us back
Yeah.
everything that we gave you. So,
A lot of good ideas.
So maybe that's something you guys can work on.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
More homework.
Sorry, I can't take that one from you.
No, that's good. The other idea we had, this doesn't have to be discussed, but was maybe coming up with an ordinance between public and private. So if it's public land, the way the developer would have to agree to like meet certain standards if they wanted the land. So yeah, it doesn't have to be discussed, but that was, I remember we were talking about that at one point too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ties into this, because, I mean, when we own the land, we generally sell it to them as, well, sometimes it is, yeah. A lot of times they'll want the land for like a reduced price, which in a way is an incentive. If we give it to them for $1 and don't give them any money, or we sell it to them for $500,000 and then give them money on top, there's just different ways of slicing it, but it's basically an incentive that they would fill out the same type of application. So.
All right. Any more discussion on that? Any more thoughts? All right. So moving on to future items for consideration. Future meeting dates. I think Brad kind of has a running list going there.
Yeah. When do you guys want to meet next?
Yeah, so is this considered our August or July?
What business do we have to do? I mean, I'd like to see that greenhouse gas resolution
Yeah.
make some progress.
That's probably our number one thing maybe then right now.
And, how do we time that depending on how it needs to go through other committees? Maybe if that's a consideration. Might behoove us to have another meeting at the end of August, I don't know, because then we got the Labor Day holiday, which always screws everything up so much.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to have it then. So this is the first Monday of August, it won't work for September. Should we just maybe continue on our regularly scheduled?
Yeah, Labor Day is Monday the 6th. What time we usually, Monday, we haven't usually been meeting, right? Hasn't been.
Maybe send another poll out, I don't know.
Yeah, I can send out.
Like our Wednesdays, or we'll just, so like I think it's the last Wednesday of every month. Does that work for everybody, or is that?
Should work. I just don't, is there a regular day that, do we ever do a poll on if there's a regularly scheduled day that works for people? Because maybe this has been the attendance, but,
Yeah.
I think it
how
had
could
been,
we bump the attendance up?
it had been Wednesdays at 5, I think.
4:30. I think we changed it to 4:30 because we get locked out.
We're meeting in the park.
Yeah. Seems fit.
No, wait a minute.
I mean, the last Wednesday in August is in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Then I'm gonna be on vacation.
So yeah, maybe just another poll.
Okay.
The reason I think we just want to find like a specific date of the week again, and specific is the first, second, third, or fourth Wednesday or whatever day.
Because we end up trying to avoid other committee meetings
Yeah.
and then
If it has to be the last Wednesday of every month, that's fine. But we were just trying to make sure everybody can attend. All right, so maybe send out another poll for this next one. And then I think at the next meeting, maybe we'll just decide. And then anybody else have any other future items?
I have a question about, so the rain barrel initiative, did that come through a committee, or was that just kind of a thing that the city did? Cause I had an idea for something similar, but I wasn't sure how it came about.
I don't know. I don't remember discussion about that. I think,
It was just a thing.
yeah, I think our public works director was also the head of our water and sewer commissions. It just something that he started. So,
Right, I was gonna say, I think that just came through.
Just came through, yeah.
The water commission wanted to put that out
Put it
there,
out, yeah.
and, I think that's just how it came to me.
Okay.
They probably have to do stormwater, they have their own stuff stormwater,
Right.
Sure.
all that stuff.
What do I want to do?
Oh, I guess I could tell you
Put it
that.
on the agenda. Yeah, get it on the agenda.
Yeah, so, I know that there were some complaints after no mow May about people didn't mind the no mowing part, but then when people mowed and they didn't properly take care of their clippings, and I know in a couple other communities, they used that as an opportunity to teach people more about composting. So like next year, you know, I mean, we can still do the rain barrels, but we could do like a discounted compost bin, initiative, and, you know, then maybe even, you know, it could be like a resident thing, but if you sign up for normal, maybe you get like an extra percentage off or something, you know, and then talk about how you can mow your lawn at the end and put your clippings in the compost bin and be done with it, kind of thing, so.
Yeah, wherever we can get those bins, I don't know.
Yeah. I can talk to the rain barrel guys and see where they got.
Well, I mean, I think the Marathon County Solid Waste Department would be helpful.
Yes, and I'm on that board, so I
Oh, there you go.
So I'll ask
Ask them
about
about
that.
that. Yeah.
There we go, perfect.
Alright, Brad, you got a good, so what do we have on the next agenda then, so, are we gonna continue discussion on 1300?
Yeah, that was near unanimous, first one voted yes, but I'll bring that back next time.
I mean, greenhouse gas. Green tier, is that something you need to follow up on, or is that something you can do behind the scenes for now?
Can maybe provide an update if I have some stuff next time.
On redevelopment, if you guys have any follow-up on that, maybe, and then the strategic plan, I think was something.
Yeah, I'll at least, maybe I'll talk with Katie and see if we can schedule some time specifically for this.
I have just some interest in understanding where the process is, even if it's an update on this is where they're at with the strategic plan, so that we always find
Sure.
if there's strategic times for us to insert ourselves into it, so.
Yeah, it's been a little convoluted, we're marching on a path and then we kinda got diverted.
Yeah.
We're definitely not too late right now,
So
so
bring your whereases next time.
that's right.
Alright, so vote to adjourn,
I move,
first. Motion,
I'll move to adjourn.
and second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Bye.
Ah.
All opposed?
Not this time.